What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Salty Runback, here to be your weekly intake of North American Developmental League of Legends. We're in a bit of a weird limbo area with this episode. It's like 1 in the morning when we're recording this because we have to make sure we finish the first round of the Promotion Relegation Tournament, which just has wrapped up their first round of play. The provisional teams not doing as well as we expected. The qualifiers teams going 3 for 4 in the first round, which means at least one team will be relegated at the end of it all. But we got a lot to talk about in that regard. And also, the CLOL Bracket has come out. We're going to be previewing that in part 2. My name is Grapes. I'm joined by Hawk. Hawk, how are you doing today?
Grapes, I'm doing great. I got to see a friend that graduated. We hung out today, and now it is very late at night, and we watched some great League of Legends. Or I say we. I only got to see one series because I am in the depths of about to graduate hell in terms of work right now. But you got to see all of the series, and I think they were all pretty good.
They were all 2-0s.
They were all.
Some of them were a little bit closer,
Yeah.
But overall,
I did see the results.
it was a fun day, a couple days of League. I think overall we learned a lot about how this tournament is actually going to end up, and as we will get into a little bit later, that might be a little bit different than our original expectations. But a couple of things to shout out before we get things started. If you are watching this at the time of release, you should head over to twitch.tv/Challengers League because your boy will be on the desk for that day of games, Wednesday, Maryville versus AOE. Going to be a fun one. I hope you come along and hang out.
Yeah. Hang out with Grapes. Grapes is going to do great. We all love a little bit of Grapes casting. He's the GOAT. And also, just as far as other things going on, you might notice that the title of this episode is CLOL 2023. Basically, we spend the first half of the episode in the headlines talking about everything that happened in the provisional tournament so far, or the promotion tournament so far. And then in the back half, it'll be all about CLOL. We got the bracket now, so we got a lot of great stuff to cover as far as developmental league in the scene.
Should be a good time. But before we do that, it's time to head over to our headlines where we have to talk about the first couple of days of the promotion relegation tournament. As we mentioned in our little intro, 3 of the 4 qualifier teams, that is Maryville University, TikTok Tony Top, or Team Tony Top, I should say, and Team Fish Taco, all 2-0'd their NACL qualifier or provisional team counterparts. The only one was Supernova, who lost 0-2 to AOE, but I think that was something that a lot of us kind of were expecting coming in. But Hawk, we weren't expecting some of these other series to go that one-sided. Did we overestimate how strong some of these provisional teams really were?
I mean, the answer, for me at least, is kind of, I guess. I have been on record on 2 podcasts that are not our own to say that there's a world in which the provisional teams are just much stronger than the qualifier teams, and this tournament is not competitive. However, I said that I don't think it's going to happen. I power ranked before the tournament both Team Liquid First and CLG, The Last Dance. I power ranked both of them 6th and 7th above only Supernova coming into the tournament. However, even then, FlyFam going down 0-2 to Tony Top, at least for me, Grapes, I don't know about you, was actually very unexpected. I thought this team would be pretty easily able to retain their spot, and now they're fighting for their life against Team Liquid. So the short answer, yes. I mean, at least for me, I did overestimate the provisional teams, but it depends on who you're talking to, maybe how much.
Again, this has been a conversation that we've had for the past couple of years, trying to compare the differences and the strengths between these qualifier teams and these provisional teams. And the real answer is that we really weren't able to know until we saw them face off. But
right.
I definitely was surprised with how our provisional teams looked. I thought overall, watching the qualifiers, the level of gameplay wasn't super high. And the provisional teams, with their experience playing against top teams, might have had a good shot to really kind of assert their dominance, especially against a team that was not Maryville, because Maryville, of course, ran through some of these tournaments that we watched this split. But specifically, the Tony Top and the Team Fish Taco series, I was particularly impressed with the way that those two teams played. I did say that Taco, I thought, was a good matchup against Team Liquid First, but I did not expect it to go that good. Surdy did not pass the Alorum test.
No, he did not.
We were talking about. Just wasn't able to break that guy at all. And overall, the rest of the team played really well. And Taco kind of just looked like the better team at the end of the day. And on the side of Tony, I thought that FlyFam really just never were able to get off on the right foot, largely in part to the fact that they did not play to the win conditions and the stuff that was allowing them to succeed throughout the back half of that season, specifically Lunacia, was playing tanks the entire time. He had a game of Malphite and a game of Scion. That's not what you want him to do. And especially against someone like Tony Top, who's playing Jax, and you let Jax through both of these drafts, and he just kind of takes over on both of them.
Yeah, Team Fish Taco against Team Liquid First is the one series I was able to catch in its entirety live. Shout out my schedule. And I agree. Like, I mean, Alorum against Surdy was actually a very hyped matchup going in. There was a whole hype video about their highlights of them solo killing each other. Like, it was super intense. Like, they've not played against each other in years. And I mean, I think this just goes to show that Alorum is actually, even though we always think of him as kind of like a consistent force in the top lane, he's actually pretty damn good, and he's getting better along. We always look at these developmental pieces as the ones that can grow, and the veteran pieces are the ones that are going to stay static. But why do we think of that? Because Alorum is a veteran piece that I think has actually gotten a lot better over the years. He is schooling a top laner like Surdy, and even in the NACLQ, I mean, sure, the quality of play is slightly lower because there's 6 fewer teams, but I mean, it has just been dominant, all split in the top lane. And I mean, as far as FlyFam and Tony Top, again, I was not expecting this at all. And the fact that FlyFam, I felt like they might be able to do really well just because their early games, even against some of the top teams in the NACL, actually were really good in the back half of the split. But they were just not able to bring it together against Tony Top whatsoever. And we've seen what Wildflower and Tony Top are able to do if they're allowed to cook, I guess, to use the overused phrase. So.
Each of these series had like a really weird level 1 in one of the games. Of course, there was the Supernova AOE incident where AOE invaded.
That was an incident. That was an incident.
That happened. We're just gonna kind of go with it. And actually, each day, had a weird level 1 incident. Last Dance Maryville, kind of just like Auto Orange invading and getting kills, but that was like not until like level 4. Tony Top versus FlyFam. Level 1 of game 1, Tony's Jax went into the enemy jungle, level 1, and just beat Hyper's Vi to death. And that kind of was it. And that the game was kind of over from there. He was able to proxy and take over after that. Wallflower, I think, had a really good series overall as well for Tony Top. Wanted to give him a little bit of a shout out. And Levitating Snow on the Lucian Nami in game 2 also coming through. I think Tony's really all clicking. As we kind of pivot a little bit here, and they look really, really strong. Especially with how I think Wallflower was able to navigate the early game, and I think in a way that reminded me more of Tony's successes in the first qualifier rather than some of the times where they maybe faltered a little bit in the second.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to say on this as well, I've already apologized to Snow too. But I got to apologize again. Look, I was a hater. I'm sorry. I didn't believe. But you showed me the light. So, Snow 2, you were right. I hope you can take me back. Because I'm crawling back to you right now. So I hope you'll have me.
Yeah, friends of the show, of course. We just have to make sure we're pandering as best as we can.
Of course.
We'll continue to root for our provisional teams as they now a lot of them find themselves in the lower bracket. But we got to head to the one provisional team that is still in the upper bracket, and that is AOE Gold. They took the series over Supernova and will be playing up against Maryville University, who also dominated the Last Dance in their series. Hawk, are these the 2 best teams that we have in the promotion relegation tournament?
Oh, this is such a hard question to answer. I mean, I don't know. Like, I do want to add a bit of context before I answer this question in earnest. First of all, with 3 out of 4 of the provisional teams actually losing, someone's going to promote and someone's going to relegate because of the fact that Team Fish Taco and Tony Top are playing against each other. So I want to point that out just for anyone that's keeping score at home. But are these 2 teams the best in the qualifier? Grapes, maybe I'll let you talk about Maryville. I'm going to talk about AOE because you talked about the Winnie incident against Supernova. I did get to see that, and that is the reason why I still think AOE is the best team in this tournament, even though they don't have Gamsu and they're playing with Quacker now. I think the mid-jungle specifically the mid-jungle support of Winnie, Darkwings, and Skytech is way too good that no matter what happens in these games, I think they're going to be more consistently dominant than anybody else that they're playing against. I think Winnie is the best player here. I know a lot of you were saying Surdy. I was willing to agree. Surdy's great, but I think Winnie is a jungler that is sort of above this provisional level and has been playing at that level for even the last year or so. His pathing is so intelligent and clearly a player that that really knows what's going on the map at most stages of the game, and that was on full display. Winnie was doing a lot of the right things. So for that reason alone, I think AOE at the very least is still the favorite in this tournament.
You want to hear something crazy? I'm going to make a prediction right now.
I'm ready. Okay.
Maryville 3-2 in this series. I think AOE gets sent to the lower bracket.
Enlighten me.
Maryville, they've looked so good, man. Ever since they actually made it into the playoffs with that quarterfinal win over Native, they just look so dominant. They only dropped one game.
You're right. They have looked good.
And honestly, AOE, they of course won their series pretty handily against Supernova, but it was a lot sloppier than I think a lot of people were expecting. Winnie overextended on the engage, on the invade, which allowed for Onat to get a couple of early kills for First Blood. And with that, punish, it allowed for Azog and Chookies to actually really take over. That game was actually pretty Supernova favored for the first 10 minutes. And I think if Kisno didn't go 0-6 or 0-7 or whatever in that game, Supernova would have had a good chance to actually win off of the early laning power that they do have in their bottom lane and how Winnie was able to get punished at the beginning of that game. Unfortunately, Winnie was just a lot better than Kisno that whole series.
See, that's what I'm talking about, Grace.
It didn't really matter. But they're playing against Maryville now, and Odd Orange is not Kisno. I mean, you look at the experience levels between these two junglers, they both have played so much and I think are going to be a really good matchup. But something that I am really interested to see is how AOE kind of is able to withstand the early game aggression that Maryville had, because the way that they played the map against the Last Dance was really good. It's the standard thing that we see from them, right? Where they don't necessarily get kills, but they just have so many winning lanes that at the 10-minute mark they're up 3,000 cold, regardless. If First Blood hasn't been given up. And I am interested to see in how that goes. I would not be surprised to see them actually really take advantage, especially on the top side of the map, where although Quacker was good against Dragoon, especially that game 2, maybe not as much of that weak side threat as Gamsu was.
Yeah, I do think Niles has been our best performing top laner. I mean, we gave 4 out of 5 of the Maryville players our first team all NACL, right? This is our MVP mid laner against our Dark Wings. This is our first team top laner, my B1 Niles up against Quacker this time. So I do agree with you. Maryville is going to be a big test. I do think AOE, this is, I think, part of what I was talking about. They are a team that over the course of time, especially with these Winnie iterations that they've had for the past 3 splits now, they're a team that actually has demonstrated a pretty tremendous amount of flexibility as far as playing more aggressive in the early stages of the game while also being able to withstand pressure. So I'm with you. I expect this to at least be a good matchup. You said 3-2. You said you're favoring Maryville. I think that's a spicy take, and I'm here for it. And I think that goes to show, regardless of who the real favorite in the series is, we're expecting this to actually be very, very competitive, and for Maryville to push AOE to the brink or vice versa.
Quick little fun storyline, which actually goes into our part 2 of CLOL. Winnie and Skytech were on that St. Louis University roster that lost to Maryville 3-1. Of course, there's a lot of different players on that team. There's no Darkwings, there's no Quacker, there's no Lynx, but it's a little food for thought before we head into that series. But I'm very excited to see that. We'll catch it tomorrow. I'll be flexing around with Mad Magical and Beatdown Boulevard for that, so should be a good time.
To add a little bit too, that wasn't just the roster that lost 3-1 in the finals. This is the roster that lost 3-1 at LA Comic-Con as well. Or it's a similar roster, but they were both on that too. So they got some bad blood.
Should be a fun thing to take a look at. I really do think that it's going to be a fun series, and it will be the first team that we welcome either back or welcome into the NACL. Should be a good time. But we got to head down to the lower bracket for a little bit, as we can talk about one of our other provisional teams in Team Liquid first. We kind of came into this tournament with the expectation that LJX would still be their starting AD carry, but it was announced, or when the stream ended up happening, that Miya actually came back and played a good series against Team Fish Taco. 2 games of Aphelios, had some high moments, had some lows, a little bit of an interesting play around the Baron in game number 1. We'll get back.
You don't need to do her like that, Graves.
But I think that obviously this is a different roster of Team Liquid first than we originally expected. Does her return to the roster give you any more hope than we originally had? Because I know you were really doomer on Team Liquid going into this event.
I was. I said they would be the worst provisional team, and I still kind of stand by that because they actually had some early leads against Team Fish Taco that they couldn't capitalize on, and that's not all Mia's fault. But the short answer to this question is no. I don't think Mia's return gives me hope, and I'm really sad about that because I really want to root for Miya, and I think Mia's a great personality. She, is on Twitter and says funny things sometimes in streams. Shout out Miya, but she just didn't really impress me that much in NACL, and I know when she took a step back from the NACL, I said something similar where LJX coming in obviously has not looked amazing, has looked more like a Band-Aid sort of player, but I think at the end of the day, Miya still doesn't strike me as that much of an X Factor player to make me believe in this roster more. So the short answer, Grapes, is I'm still doomer on this roster, and I'm sad about it because I want to root for these players, but it's just I've not really seen the stars align for them.
Is Miya an upgrade? Yes. Is Miya a big upgrade? Yeah, I think so. Over LJX. Does that matter? We'll have to see. I think Miya actually did pretty good in lane in the early game against Taco and Red Adaption.
I want to add
exploitable bottom lane.
I want to add that is a pretty good sign as well. I know Red and Daption have been criticized for their laning, but I think Miya and Rovex in lane specifically when they were playing in NACL was a big concern. So it is nice to see that the laning was better from them. So
yeah. I do think the flaws of Mia's gameplay for this series was in the team fights where there were multiple instances where she got caught out, whether it was by a Dardoch Wukong ult or some hook coming out from Daption. Somehow just never found perfect positioning in a lot of the fights to put out maximum DPS. Although we did see some nice pop-off moments on the Aphelios, kind of when the game was already over and Aphelios kind of is able to just throw the ultimate at everybody running into him. So shout out to Miya for that fun base defense, but I think overall that is something that we have to look at.
Yeah.
But I think another interesting thing that we have to take into account is that not only do Team Liquid First have to beat FlyFam here, now that they're in the lower bracket, they now have to play as well against the loser of AOE versus Maryville in the lower bracket, and that's the best of 5 that will qualify into the NACL, and the loser is out still. And so while it might help me move the needle a little bit against FlyFam, I don't know if it helps me move the needle enough because, as we mentioned in the last question, I think that AOE and Maryville are the strongest teams in this tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think this moves the needle enough at all. I'm definitely rooting for Miya. I know I'm sure taking a step back from the NACL was difficult and everything, and I think she is most certainly an upgrade over LJX. I think it's fair to say LJX coming in was pretty much just a Band-Aid roster change. But I think Team Liquid First just has problems that run deeper than simply AD carry. They just as a whole seem like a team that struggles to really get going on the bottom side of the map and sustain something to be able to win games. So I'm with you. Even if they're able to get past FlyFam, I don't see them getting past Maryville or AOE, who are the two teams that I power ranked very high coming in. So
yeah, matchup against FlyFam should be kind of interesting. It was, of course, a matchup that we saw at the last half or last week of the regular season where FlyFam 2-0'd. And I think that Hyper in the jungle is going to have a good time in that matchup because City Witty, as much as I was really hyping him up coming into the year, has not looked super good, especially in this tournament.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's cooled off as well. I feel like he started pretty strong in NACL, but it hasn't really hasn't come together.
It'll be a fun thing, and I think that's a good transition to our fourth headline of the day. We have 4 matchups that we have scheduled for the next 3 days. Of course, that is AOE versus Maryville. It is Tony versus Team Fish Taco, and then in the lower side of the bracket, we have TL First versus FlyFam, and then Last Dance versus Supernova. Out of those 4 games, Hawk, I want you to give me one player matchup, either 1v1, 2v2, whatever, that you're excited to watch in the next 3 days.
Grapes, I think the answer here, there's a couple of really strong answers. Mine is most certainly, though, Supernova against Last Dance, Messages against ONAT. We never got to saw it in the qualifiers during the split. 2 very new, young mid laners looking to prove themselves. Messages subbing in for the Last Dance on short notice after not making this tournament with Native. I think this is incredibly exciting. We had Messages as our second team mid laner and Onat as our third. So I think this is going to be an incredibly exciting matchup. I'm really looking forward to seeing them duke it out. And especially given that it's an elimination matchup, I think it'll be great. And the last thing I'll add, too, is not only is it an elimination matchup, but I think they're probably very integral players to their team. I think we think of Last Dance as being a bit of a team that wants to play around NXI, maybe a little bit more mid-jungle, and Supernova as well. They like to play towards their sides, bringing mid-jungle to the 3v3s, to the 4v4s, and really making a party. So that's where I'm at.
Something that the broadcast has frequently mentioned is that they think that NXI is actually a pretty good player, and I would be inclined to agree. But throughout the season, the lanes just were not stable enough for him to do anything, and that is why CLG Faith kind of lost a lot of their games. I think that Messages actually in that series that they had against Maryville put up a decent fight against Get Back and had some solid moments, especially in game number 1. And that actually, I think, could be the angle for NXI to really come in and win this game because
Agree.
While I do think that NXI maybe is one of the stronger junglers that we have here, I think that Kisno is probably the weakest, just given some of the recent performances that we have seen and the fact that he is a very new player. So I think NXI really has to show up against Supernova, and Messages versus Onat is going to be a key part of that because you know how much Supernova likes to play around that mid jungle, just going for plays all across the map. And I think that overall this is also an exciting matchup just because of the fact that it's just two mid laners in like a pool in the qualifiers where it was basically just Get Back and then everyone else. But these were two that we thought had like the most promise, and why we really decided to highlight them. And so seeing them come out of this will be really fun.
I fully agree, Grapes. And especially, I know Messages, when we had him on the show and I got to talk to him and Fan, had something to say about Supernova. And so I wonder if this will be a bit of a grudge match as well. I think Messages is going to want to take Supernova down. So that's really why I'm excited about this matchup. But I don't know, Graves, are there any others? Is there anyone that you're really looking at that's going to deliver on all fronts here?
Yeah, Matt first of all, Messages is going to really want his revenge, and I think that's going to be a good story. He's going to take all that personally if we take some references to Jordan.
He will.
Back and forth.
Messages is hungry, and he talked about that on the show. It was really interesting to listen to. So I'm expecting a bit of fireworks between those two players.
I'm also going to go to the lower bracket, and I will take the top lane matchup in FlyFam versus Team Liquid First, Surdy versus Lunacia. This was something that we talked about in Week 7, of course, but we also learned in an interview that Lunacia did that him and Surdy actually talked a lot in the offseason and also throughout the year, and Surdy was kind of serving as a bit of a mentor to Lunacia and teaching him a lot of the ways that top lane was supposed to go, and we saw that actually work really well because Lunacia had a really great season, and both of these players are kind of the focal points of their teams, especially at least when, in my opinion, they utilize their players the right way, because in the series that we had this week, I don't think that ended up happening. Surdy played 2 games of Cassante. Lunacia, as we talked about earlier, 1 game of Sign, 1 game of Malphite. If you want to win with these teams, that's not what you want to do. So I really hope in this do-or-die best-of-3, these two players, the mentor versus the student, go at each other with all the carry picks in the world, and one of them ends up on top at the end of the day.
I'm here for it. I mean, I know it's a matchup we've already gotten to see, but only 2 games of it. I definitely could. I would accept a couple more, and I agree that these are 2 players that are the focal point of their teams, but come on, great. Like there's got to be no one in AOE against Maryville that we're like, give me blood, you know?
We talked about the junglers, I feel like a decent amount.
You're right. Winnie Odd Orange, Winnie get Dark Wings against Get Back Odd Orange should be pretty spicy. So
yeah, that would be my other one, I guess, if we wanted to talk about those. But let's move on to our last headline, and it has to do not with the promotion tournament, but with some other roster moves that have been happening. Immortals has kind of been cleaning house a little bit. They just announced that they released Revenge. They also, of course, signed Treats, and a lot of interesting things with that. But in that process, they have left a lot of course, spots open on their provisional roster, or on their challengers roster, I should say, and they decided to fill it in a bit of an interesting way. They are holding tryouts for the Immortals Progressive Combine this week, where a lot of players will come in, play some games, and hopefully show off to some scouts how good they really are. We're going to pull up the Combine rosters right now, and what we're going to do, Hawk, we're going to pick one team that you that you think could perform in NACL that you want out of this pool of players?
Yeah, so here's the roster for the Combine for anyone that does not know or has not seen this. And I mean, I'm you know what? I'll just give you my roster. I won't preface it. I always preface my answers, but if I'm looking to build a roster that I think could compete in NACL and do well, I'm taking Surdy, Griffin, Shochi, Lens, and Rox right off the bat. I think these aren't even necessarily the 5 best players now. However, they are all 5 really, really good. But I think there's a really strong mix of personalities, developmental pieces, as well as experience, and the ability of compatible playstyles as well. Specifically, that mid jungle of Shochi Griffin, seeing Griffin's name back on a competitive combine of some sort, whether or not he ends up playing in the NACL, which I hope he does. I think this is one of the most exciting prospects in the entire scene, Grapes. So this is who I would pick, and I think it would be pretty good.
All right, I'm gonna try my best. You did steal a couple of your picks, a couple of my picks. I was going to go with Surdy and Griffin because how couldn't I?
You can't not go for Surdy and Griffin, right? And that feels weird to slight like Perry, Keel, and even Music, right? Like the jungle roster is kind of stacked, but Griffin. I mean, we've not seen him play for over a year at this point, right?
Yeah.
So
we're
waiting for it.
I'm going to take an approach where I try to, of course, mix development with some veterancy. That's something that you did as well. You had Surdy on your team, which I think is a very solid veteran. But what I'm going to do first is going to select my mid-jungle to be a key group of veterans that can facilitate the rest of the team. And for that, I'm going to go Armeo, and I'm going to pick Soligo as well. Because Soligo, I think, had a really good bounce-back year on Wildcard this year. And Armeo is probably one of the best junglers in NA that's not currently on an LCS team. And so having that group, I think, could do a really good job at teaching the rest of these younger players that I'm going to select. And now that we get into it, I will pick Lunacia as, of course, my top laner. We talked about him a little bit earlier. We'll have that matchup, maybe Surdy versus Lunacia, in our Combine as well, Hawk, if we actually have these teams play out.
Hell yeah.
And my bot lane, I will have Dawnbray in the bot lane at support role, who, of course, is a player that has been in 100 Thieves Next and Evil Genius's Prodigies in the past couple of years. And my AD carry, I'll go Blaster. This is a player that maybe you're not super familiar with, but he is the ADC for Ball State. He is unfortunately not native to America. He's not a resident, but he's playing here in Collegiate, so he's not able to play on NACLQ teams. However, I have heard really, really good things out of him in terms of CLOL and also some of the tryouts that he had coming into this season. So I will pick up him and hope that him and Dawnbreak can be some of the cool pieces alongside Lunacia that can grow with this experienced mid-jungle.
I like that pick. I like that pick a lot, honestly. That is spicy. You're not going to take Minwi. You're going to leave Minwi off the board after that year on Fear.
Yeah. I mean, I was going for like some new pieces, I guess.
No,
but
I like it. I mean,
maybe Minwi's too expensive after all that. I mean, I already spent on Armeo. I already spent on Soligo. I might have to.
I see it. I see it.
Budget.
I mean, I could totally see it. Especially alongside a support like Dawnbray, who's been around for a bit and looked really good on a few different teams now. I see the big thing with mine, right? I think Shochi. Soligo had a great split, by the way, on Wildcard. Really looked great on the bounce back, and I think was very impressive. But the one thing that's always stood out to me about Shochi as a player is Shochi strikes me as sort of like the Niski type of player, maybe, where sort of a bit of a Swiss Army knife play style. Someone that has been able to carry the team in moments of truth, but also has been willing to play some of the weirder shit. He's got things like Zillion or Tryndamere and those kind of champions in the wheelhouse as well, and alongside players like Surdy, Griffin, and Lens that are pretty big carries in their own right. Like, I think that sort of tool set could be very, very valuable.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would not be surprised if your team was better than mine at the end of the day. But
I got to pick first. I like
the development pieces that I picked up.
No, that's valid. You went for some of the spicier ones. I got to pick first. Like, it's fine,
Well,
I'm excited to watch this though. Like it should be exciting to
Yeah.
getting to see these players compete, and
I
I always love combines.
I think there's like one day that they're streaming games. I don't really know what's happening. Immortals, if you want to hire us, we'll probably be around. Who knows? But that is going to be it for our headlines for this episode. Time to head into part two, where we'll be previewing the CLOL bracket. It may be April, but the madness of March, in basketball at least, is translating over to Collegiate League of Legends. The CLOL 2023 bracket has arrived, and matches will be starting this Saturday and with the round of 32. We started to get into CLOL a little bit over these past couple of episodes, Hawk, but it's really been a long road, even from the fall when we had the kickoff tournaments, but really entering January when things really got underway.
Yeah, definitely. It has really been a long road, but I mean, we're here, right? It's CLOL and Grapes. I know both of us have been getting really into CLOL this split. We're getting passionate about it because this is, I feel like, it feels weird to say this, but it's like a relatively untapped part of the NA developmental pipeline and a really exciting part with so much talent deep inside of it, and especially a lot of personality. So, I mean, I'm really, really excited to get to see this tournament kick off, Grapes.
Yeah, of course, there's schools like Maryville who are playing both here in this tournament, maybe a bit of a spoiler, as well as the promotion tournament that's happening, where I think it really is a cool way that meshes together the paths to pro, where we have like collegiate teams kind of going into semi-pro. And I think overall that's just a good statement for how this bracket actually ended up, because I think a lot of the teams here are very, very stacked and could really come through. But let's explain the format a little bit before we show off the teams that will be competing. There are a bunch of different conferences. The main ones are the North, South, East, West, that of course compete over a season. There are also different partner conferences, which are conferences that Riot kind of gives rights to and access to unlocked accounts and things like that, where they play their season out. Kind of think of them as like the mid majors, where the East, South, North, and West are your like Power 5 conferences if you follow collegiate sports in any way. But basically how it works is they each conference plays their seasons out, and depending on the historical strength of each of the conferences, some of the representatives, like the top representative from each conference, will make it through. So the way it worked is like the top 4 teams in the North Conference got bids, the top 3 in the South, and the top 1 in the West, and then some other amalgamation of the other conferences as well. That accounted for 24 of the 32 teams, and the last 8 teams were voted in by a committee of collegiate experts, and that those teams were seeded into a bit of a bracket, and I don't know, Hawk. Am I missing anything here? I know you competed in CLOL as well, so if you want to
Okay, whoa. That is a strong statement. Yeah, my lovely Plat team at Elon University competed in the open division of CLOL, and we played like shit. No. But it was fine. But yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it. I was just laughing at the fact that I mean, it's true, but East, South, the East, South, North, and West as the Power 5 schools, when the Pac-12 is literally like one of the partner conferences that is our mid-majors. I mean, it's completely accurate as far as Collegiate League of Legends, but it's funny to hear that as a fan of also traditional college sports. But yeah, I mean, as you said, single elimination, best of 3s and best of 5s going throughout. And I mean, it's going to be a March Madness, our own little one here for League of Legends.
The first 3 weeks, round of 32, 16, and now round of 8 will all be online, and then the top 4 get flown out to LA to play in the LCS studios, which is always a really
Rest
cool
in
thing.
peace, round of 8, by the way.
You know, at least some schools get the opportunity. Although I know that was definitely some stuff that caused some drama over the last couple of days. We can get into how the teams actually ended up seeding and who is going to be competing in the tournament right now as we pull up how the committee decided to seed these teams. Now, the way that it works is similar to the March Madness tournament, where you're not seeding them directly 1 through 32, but you're putting them into different groups based on how you generally think that they are seeded and how generally you think they are ranked. For example, in A, Maryville, St. Louis, St. Thomas, and Winthrop are your 1 seeds, where in Group H, Butler, Farmingdale, RPI, and Utah could basically be considered your 8 seeds, and they get put into like 4 different quadrants, and every 1 seed is randomly matched up against a random 8 seed. There were a couple of contingencies here. You could not rank a team that finished higher than another team in a collegiate conference lower than that specific team. So, for example, since Maryville was the first place team in the North, they could not be placed lower than any other teams in the North in terms of groups. But St. Louis is the second place team, so they were able to be in the same group. But
Yeah.
but that just makes it so you have to actually compete well in your conference in order to be seeded, and that there's not other like extenuating circumstances like previous expectations that play too much of a role into the seeding. It did create for a couple of interesting scenarios, as you might already see on your screen. For example, McMaster was a school in the East Conference that performed a little bit over the expectations of the other schools in that group, such as Western, Toronto, and Harrisburg. And so because of that, even though a lot of the committee probably thought that Harrisburg, Toronto, and Western were stronger schools than McMaster, they could not put them in a higher group, which is why they are all kind of put into Group D, or as Shonatonen called yesterday, the Deast Conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Group D is so funny. It literally is just the top 4 from East. But I mean, I feel like the seeding system, just to start off, like it actually made a lot of sense. Having the committee was a good thing. Same as NACLQ, right? And I mean, lots of really good schools here, and I mean, we've got like a lot of our usual suspects, a lot of our big dogs in the top 4, the top 8 even, but also some names that if you've been a fan of collegiate for a while may not be as familiar with, specifically Grapes. Waterloo up there in the top 8, a team with some players that we might recognize as NACLQ fans, but if you're a old school collegiate fan, may not be quite as familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, we could run through some of the teams at the top that you need to know for sure if you are somebody who is just starting to follow CLOL. Of course, if you are a fan of Salty Runback, you have heard the name Maryville quite a lot because they have been in a lot.
Probably
of
UST as well. You're probably familiar. Winthrop, you would know of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So Maryville is basically running the exact same roster as they are running in the NACL qualifiers. That is Niles, Auto Orange, Getback, Sierra Jerry, and Zyko. I feel like we don't have to talk about them too much, but they, of course, are a historical organization in the collegiate space. They won titles in both 2017 and 2019 and came very close in 2021 and 2022. And I think are probably the favorites considering how good they have been, especially this season in NACLQ.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Maryville. I mean, Maryville has looked like the best team, right? Especially, I think most people would have considered the North Conference the hardest conference. There's a reason why their top 2 are both 1 seeds, despite Maryville taking care of St. Louis in the finals. But St. Louis, you would probably recognize a couple of the players over there as well. Vital, if you watched Academy last year, and then Winnie, Aaron, Skytech, even Strompist, you might know from if you're a fan of amateur. UST, we've talked about them a lot. Basically, Team Fish Taco, but they got a little AD carry named Shogo that if you haven't heard of, you're going to hear about after watching CLOL, because honestly, Grapes, it's a bit of a travesty that he's not playing in North America right now in the developmental pipeline outside of CLOL. So
Shogo is, I think, he's so good, man.
Shogo is a beast. I mean, Shogo is it a hot take for me to say that Shogo is the best AD carry in this tournament?
I don't
He looked like it last year,
so,
at least. Yeah. I mean, I got to watch him play live at finals, and that guy was fucking smurfing. I watched him fall down really far behind on Vayne, get 1 shutdown, and then carry the entire game. That game was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Based it into just a little too much, and it was over.
If you're not familiar, St. Thomas, a school out of Texas, first place in the South. They were your defending champions. They won last year, beating Maryville in the semifinals 3-1, which is a really interesting storyline as well. We could round out our group A.
That was a 5 game, right? That was a 5-game series, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe it was 5. Interesting. Okay, I'll have to go back and check the tape on that. But our last team here in Group A is Winthrop University, the Winthrop Eagles. You've seen a little bit of them in the NACLQ, but they have a bit of a different roster because Mobility is back from Evil Genius's challenger, his stint there as a substitute. So no more ZKG. Hawk can stop flaming this poor man and see a roster from Winthrop that...
Whoa. What? Hang on. I have not flamed ZKG too much. I've just voiced my concerns for the bottom lane. But you're right. Mobility coming back in is an upgrade.
Winthrop actually is part of a conference called the NACC, which is a partner conference that is really good and also holds two of the teams in Group B as well, in Fisher College and Ole Miss. Friend of the program, Colomer, is the coach at Ole Miss. You might recognize some of the faces there, such as Nem9 in the top lane, not the mid lane, and Rhino. They also have some younger players in the middle of the map that are some interesting watches as well. They actually beat York and placed in the finals of NACC, where they lost against Winthrop. And that is why they're here in Group B and not Group A. Fisher is a school that contains a lot of the players and staff that were previously from Bay State. You might recognize some of those names as well, as there's a lot of players there that are currently in the NACL or NACLQ. I think right off the top of my head is Bajani, Keel, Saranok, Sophus Sage, DMK from CCG, and then Trevor, I think, also plays on Fisher as well. So that's a team that's really stacked. And this kind of brings up an interesting thing with like them and St. Louis as teams that like are a bunch of NACL players, but they haven't really got to scrim together, even though maybe their rosters are maybe a bit stronger on paper.
Yeah, it has been evident at times if you watch them. Sometimes they're kind of just balling out there, you know.
Yeah.
Also, you were right. UST Maryville was a 4-game series. I could have swore that one went 5. I was I'm mad I misremembered that. But either way, you were right. Grapes is always right. But but yeah, Fisher and St. Louis in particular. When you look at the names on that roster, aside from maybe Maryville or UST, you would think that they would be the two best teams, but they do really not play together that much, at least so it seems. But then that does finally, I brought it up earlier, that brings us into the other two teams in the top 8 grapes. St. Clair and Waterloo. You've probably heard about St. Clair if you're a fan of the show. They made group stage at the NACLQ, but not really one of the usual suspects as far as high-level collegiate play goes, at least not being considered a top 8 team. And then also Waterloo. Them as well, another team that has played at a decently high level for a while, but now really for the first time is making the CLOL Championship and looking to contend with some of the best.
Yeah, Waterloo has players Onat and Last Dance from Supernova and CB Gaming / Miracle, two players that were really up and coming in the NACLQ space and I thought performed pretty well. And they're backed by a core of players that have been together for the past 3 years, I believe, in Inexhaustive, Legans, and Pika Pika. So that should be a really fun core to watch. I actually think that they're going to make a pretty big run. They were by far the best team in the Eastern Conference. They beat Toronto and they beat McMaster to win the whole thing.
They are a team that I think a lot of people are saying is a dark horse to really contend for the title. So maybe one that you all want to have your eyes on.
Last thing about St. Clair as well, before we go into some of our others like sleeper picks or picks or schools with like players that you might know. St. Clair, of course, competed in the NACLQ number 2, but they were missing 2 pieces that I think were very important. Of course, they did have their top jungle and support in Ricky, Maddie, and their support Boschetti, sorry, it took me a second. But they're 2 players that are in the mid and ADC that weren't playing in NACQ for various reasons. One of them named Akashi, who is currently, I think, like ranked 6 on the solo queue ladder.
Is in the Immortals Combine, by the way.
In the Immortals Combine as well, yeah. And actually is a really, really cracked piece on that team that really hasn't gotten the chance on the stage in a similar situation to Shogo because they don't have any residency and can't compete in the NACLQ. And the AD carry for St. Clair is going to be Rockboom, who we had as our rookie of the split player on Rock Bottom Esports, who had an incredible run with that team in the second OQ. Apart from St. Clair. So those are the 2 players on that team, which I think is why the committee ranked them pretty high. But Hawk, we can go into some of the other teams kind of briefly. Who are some here that have players that you're excited to watch, or maybe people that are fans of the NACL might recognize?
Yeah, I mean, I'll hit a couple off rapid fire. You can maybe fill in the gaps for me. Northwood, you might recognize them as the team that went 2-3 in the qualifiers 2 times in a row. Grapes and I streamed it once. It's really depressing. They beat Maryville. And they didn't make the tournament, which is still, like, I think the craziest
incredible feat
that's happened all year. They went 2-0 and then 0-3. That was really depressing. But they were, I believe, at 3rd place in the North Conference, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Also, Harrisburg, they still got some pieces from that old DK crew roster. as well as they've changed up a little bit. Western has Lynx on the team, who we've talked about earlier in this episode. You've got Toronto, who has been streamed on the channel. UCSD played in the Open Qualifiers. York had a miracle run in the Open Qualifiers last year. There's a couple teams here and there with some players that you all might recognize.
Yeah, some other people that have some experience in the NACL, NACLQ. Grandview have Pluto,
True.
And of course that roster made some different runs here.
They're your boys, Grapes. They're your hometown heroes.
They are indeed the boys, and I am a big fan of the Midwest Esports Conference, another partner conference that I got to cast a lot of games of. Speaking of Ottawa, another team in this group have Trickster, down in group number letter F. Trickster, of course, from Godel Gamers / other team, Mirage Alliance as well. Just general amateur mainstay. Some other players you might recognize like Riversided and Young. And some other looking around. ISU, of course, also in Group F, have competed in the first NACLQ. Drew Dozer, Meslo. It should be fun. Just like a bunch of players that are really, really skilled and have a really good infrastructure there. And the last team that I want to highlight here, Hawk, before we can head into some spicy bracket predictions here. In Group E, we have Ohio State. Now, you might know Ohio State as, of course, being a school that's very good at traditional sports.
Ohio State University.
But they have a player that you might recognize if you've been following the amateur scene for a while, and that is Fire in the mid lane. The man came back to play some collegiate League of Legends and got his team into the CLOL group stage.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I would be very surprised if I was. Fire is the only player in this tournament that has won a Proving Grounds championship. So
I think
he's pretty
right.
cracked.
Yeah.
He's pretty cracked.
There are a lot of other teams
the rest of the team maybe not as cracked, but hey, Fire's pretty cracked.
There's a reason why the team from a team with Fire in it is in the Group E and not higher than that. That's all I'm gonna say. They lost in the quarterfinals of the North, and were I think a bit of a controversial pick in by the committee because they did not auto qualify into the actual tournament, which is another interesting thing to mention really quickly. I think overall, other than that, a lot of the rosters. Not many of us are expecting to make too big of strides in the tournament, so I think what we can do now is pull up the bracket, what it looks like, and also what we specifically have pulled up. Are we gonna go, Hawk, with both your bracket first, my bracket first? What's the deal here?
Grapes, I'm gonna pull up your bracket, and I will let you enlighten me as to why you've chosen as such, and then I will tell you why you are wrong. But actually, we're probably in agreement about a lot of this stuff. So,
well, first of all, through this bracket, you can see some of the matchups that we actually end up having. Some of them that were really, really tough for me to choose were Grandview versus Illinois State. The way that ISU got put into this tournament position is because they unfortunately had to FF their first round of the playoffs, and so were not in a position to actually qualify in, and so therefore had to be voted in, and because of that they got placed lower due to some of the other rules that we had before. And one team, that is Grandview, got a little bit unlucky in having to match up against them. That was a really tough matchup to decide in the first round. Looking around the rest of the bracket, Toronto versus York over on the bottom left I think is an interesting one as well. And Western versus UCSD is a cool one up in the top right. Other than that, Harrisburg versus OSU, of course, is a cool one as well. If we're just going through one matchup from each side of the bracket. And I would not sleep on Cleary either. They are a team that is full of like a bunch of import players that previously were part of the University of North America, which is a team that participated in the CLOL Championships last year. And they also have Kiyuki, who is analyst on Golden Guardians playing support for them. So that is a cool little thing that we can throw into there as well. They beat Aquinas, who is a big favorite in one of the partner conferences to make it in. They're playing up against Ole Miss, who I think might be a little bit vulnerable here in this first round. But I did not have them ended up going out in that matchup. Overall, those are some of the matchups that I particularly was interested in the first round. But the only upset that I had was actually Ottawa beating UCI. Just because, we didn't mention UCI at all. They have Gorka and Light Pulse and Cinnamon Bread and Mike Young on that team, and we forgot to mention them, but they have not looked great in the qualifiers. Is kind of the point that I was making, and so that is why I have we'll throw an upset in there. They always have to have an upset in this
And
matchup.
I know we called the four cardinal direction conferences, I guess, as the Power Five conferences, but gotta be honest, Graves, the West Conference, kind of a meme
A little
this year, at least compared to the other three.
Yeah.
And especially compared to the NACC, which had Winthrop, Ole Miss, and Fisher. So, yeah, I think it's definitely UCI, maybe a little bit on the weaker end, and Ottawa, a team that was being pretty explosive in the MEC, really pushing Grandview to their limits. So, it's cool actually that they got voted in, and I think that's another matchup that definitely I would want to keep your eyes on. I'm mostly in agreement with you as far as what you've picked, as well as the matchup to keep everyone's eyes on. I definitely agree that the Toronto York matchup early on looks like it'll be a very competitive one. Grandview ISU, another one, two teams that are maybe not as consistent. Western UCSD, you said all these, but I just want to reiterate, these are definitely, at least as far as round one matchups go, probably going to be very exciting.
Yeah, if we can go a little bit deeper as well, as I have my general takeaways with how things might end up going. I think Waterloo is really, really good, and even though Winthrop does pick up mobility, I do have them advancing to the semifinals to face off against Maryville. But at the end of the day, other than that, it's so hard to like pick these other upsets, Hawk, because
Yeah.
I don't know, like the top four just seems so good. The top three or top two just seems so good. I do think like the top right is a area where maybe things get a little bit weird, especially if SLU like isn't as practiced as some of the other teams may be. Northwood versus Ole Miss, I do have Ole Miss going out of that just because as we were watching Northwood throughout either the CLOL bracket or in the NACL Qs that they ended up playing. I thought
Mhm.
that Reppy and Chrono needed to take another step in order for that team to really get to that next level. And I think that Ole Miss overall were playing really good as a team in the NACC. So that is why I have them moving through. Although I definitely could see a world where Northwood makes a really deep run. And in terms of my semifinals, it's pretty stock standard, except for Waterloo over Winthrop. Maryville St. Thomas is my finals matchup because those teams are just so good. I mean, they're both in the promotion relegation tournament, basically. So it's hard to not put them in there. And I do have
Yeah.
Maryville taking it all because this is just the year of Maryville, man. They're so good.
Maybe this is a good time to just transition to my bracket while I give some of my thoughts on everything you just said, because I also went with just a lot of chalk. I agree with you again. The top right definitely does look like, I think as far as the mid-tier teams in the conference, like the spiciest side of the bracket. Northwood, Ole Miss, I think as far as if we're looking at pure chalk as a round of, what is that, round of 16 matchup, would be the most competitive. I've seen a lot of Northwood Hopers on Twitter. I'm just going to be honest. I've seen a lot of Northwood Hopers on Twitter. I think y'all are a bunch of copers. St. Louis took Northwood out to the dumpster last time these two teams played. It may have been a 3-1, but it was not a close 3-1. Okay, let me tell you. I think SLU is a cut above these teams, but I do think Western, Ole Miss, Northwood are all really good. So they maybe could start something, but I'm expecting SLU to still take care of business. Another matchup I do want to bring attention to, at the end of the day, I have Winthrop making the semifinals. I've just got all the one seeds. It's really boring. But I think,
Seeds.
yeah. But I think Harrisburg could maybe do some damage as well. That's one of those schools that you never really want to count out, even though I do think Winthrop should definitely be favored against them. You never really know when Harrisburg will just decide to like play cracked out of their minds. That's another matchup. Unlike you, Graves, I have UST taking it all. Look, I agree with you. It does feel like it's the year of Maryville, but again, this Team Fish Taco team that I think you might be grading them as doesn't have Shogo.
That's fair.
And I think Shogo is him. That's it. I think Shogo's him. So I think that brings St. Thomas, especially as a school, a team fighting team, way above the limits that Team Fish Taco can hit with red.
That's very interesting. I hope to see a lot of really good Shogun moments in the next couple of weeks. I'm interested in your point about Harrisburg because we have not seen them look super good in the East Conference matchups that we have watched. We had them play against Toronto, and they won 5 early games and they lost 3 of the 5 games. They are kind of like the Fly Fam of
Yeah.
in the fact that they just kind of end up doing that a lot of the time, and it didn't seem to really get
See,
better.
so let me explain myself on this because I'm like with you. Like this team sucks, but
Hey,
they are
sucks,
awesome.
but
No, but I'm about to gas them up too.
yeah.
Because they suck, but they're also amazing, right? They are like a bunch of crackheads. And I think at least as far as like mechanically, they can go toe to toe with a lot of the teams in this tournament. They just for whatever reason like sometimes struggle to bring it all together. So I totally think like against Winthrop, for example, there's a world in which they wake up and they're like, hey guys, let's like win an early game and then win the game. And then they do. And then they close the game and then they look amazing. So you're right. Maybe my language is a little strong. This team does not suck. I think Harrisburg is actually very, very good. And these players are all great. And I love you all. But that's what I think makes this team so dangerous because they could actually contend with a lot of the best teams in this tournament in the early game. It's just whether or not they can close. But if they decide to close one day, like, the team might be fucked, you know?
I think overall, there's like Maryville and UST, and then like kind of a big jump after that. I honestly
I agree. Yeah.
would not be surprised if like if SLU and Winthrop specifically did not end up coming out into the top 4 out of their half the bracket, just because I think
it would be a lot less surprising than if it happened to Maryville or UST.
Yeah, like I see the possibility of like a couple, like maybe like 3 or 4 teams winning the whole thing. But I see a possibility of like 20 to like 21 teams that I could see make a run to top 8. Like if things go their way, there's a lot of these teams in here that actually could make a run.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much talent throughout the bracket this season, and I'm really excited to see. I'm sad that St. Clair's in the Maryville side because I really would have I would have put them through like in in either of like the Winthrop or the SLU groups just because I'm big fans of those players.
I fully agree with you. I'm with you. I think some of the teams that I was actually really hyped about kind of got screwed because another one that I think could be really dangerous is Fisher College up against St. Thomas. But again, I'm gonna be real with you. You said you could see 3 or 4 teams winning this. I only see 2 teams. I think it's Maryville or St. Thomas, and I'd be surprised if it's anybody else that wins this tournament. They feel like the Titans of collegiate, and that's what they built their rosters to do. But I will agree with you in the sense that I think throughout the bracket, though, there is going to be an incredibly high amount of competition that these teams are going to leave a lot on the rift. And there will be upsets. You know, both of us, we didn't pick very many, but I think there will probably be more than we bargained for.
Trying to take a look around. I think like a team like Bethany could make a run. They lost in the first round last year and against Converse, and I really don't think they want to do that again.
They do not want to get Converse.
They do have Waterloo in the round of 16, which is a team that I had making a run. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to go for a bit of a miracle as well. They made top 4 when Colomer was their coach, and they had Bradley on their team, and a lot of the pieces that aren't Bradley still kind of remain with them right now from that 2021 roster. So maybe an option for them. Another team potentially that could make a run, York, as we were saying earlier. I mean, UCI, if they just turn up and like all their players come at the highest level, like that team also could.
This
like,
seems impossible to predict.
I could see them make top 4 as well. I could see them maybe like making a competitive matchup against Fisher or UST.
And just to shout out another couple of teams as well, I'm really looking at these teams from the East Conference to potentially be a little bit more explosive than we've maybe bargained for. McMaster, look, they made finals in that conference, and I know we don't really know much about them. And I'm not expecting them to beat Maryville. They are unfortunately against Maryville. But that is no small feat. And the East Conference, I think it's pretty fair to say, was the 3rd strongest conference this
I think
year.
the 2nd.
You think it was stronger than NACC?
Oh, no, maybe not. Oh, I think
because North was the strongest, right?
I think for East, like 1 through 8 is stronger than NACC 1 through 8, but like going 1 through 4 with just Fisher, York, Winthrop, and Ole Miss are probably stronger than like the top 4 in East, if that makes sense.
That's valid. I'll give you that. But that I think that's my point, right? Is regardless of where we rank them with the NACC, they're a top 2 or 3 conference, right, alongside the NACC. And so, I mean, making finals, not a small feat. Western, as well as Toronto as well. Like, we're kind of sleeping on them. I again, don't really expect Western and Toronto to compete against SLU and St. Thomas at the end of the day, but there are teams that I think we shouldn't sleep on. And those series might be more explosive than we've bargained for. And so even though, unfortunately, all these teams, because of the nature of the seeding, Harrisburg included, will be playing against the 1 seeds in the second round if things go according to plan. That is an area where I think we could see an upset. I brought up Harrisburg already, but it is hard to get, this is where we look at the names and we look at, all that. But when we actually look at, we don't know how good these teams actually are until we see them play, right? It's sort of like the promotion relegation tournament, because something we've learned from collegiate over and over again is that the names on the teams do not always equate to how the collegiate team plays, as opposed to NACL or NACLQ.
It's going to be really fun to see. You can catch all the action starting this Saturday and Sunday with a round of 32 kicks off. I think matches begin 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, so it does overlap a little bit with the last couple of matches of promotion relegation. But you can watch those on twitch.tv/battlefy, twitch.tv/battlefy_B, and twitch.tv/battlefy_C. I'm pretty sure I'm getting that information right. There's not a whole lot of info about streams, but I do know that the coverage will be had in some capacity. So if you want to watch these CLOL matches, make sure to check those out over the next 3 weekends. Top 4 in LA come the first weekend of June. But I think that's gonna do it, Hawk. We had a fun little episode. Go do a little CLOL, do a little promotion. A lot of League of Legends happening this week.
I am 90% sure I rambled a little bit, but that's because it is now 1:52 in the morning, our time, Grapes. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think, look, CLOL is going to be amazing. We are invested this year. We are going to be making sure to cover all the action as well as a promotion relegation, as Grapes said. Make sure you check out Grapes on the show tomorrow afternoon. Well, today afternoon, right after the episode airs, and also later on, because it's sure to be amazing. And I mean, the competition already is heating up. We've already established at least one team is getting relegated, which is crazy to think about this early on. One round and one team is already going to change. But if you didn't like what we said, maybe you think that the East is shit and they can't compete with the 1 seeds. I don't know. You can take what we said with a grain of salt. I've been Hawk. That's been Grapes. Have a great night, everyone.